A bombshell report into transgender medicine for children is being lauded as a watershed moment in the UK. Leading consultant Dr Hilary Cass handed down her report into gender-affirming treatment in the UK's National Health Service, stressing that the dangers of thousands of vulnerable children obtaining treatments based on remarkably weak evidence. Now, our own Prime Minister is under pressure to replicate this review in Australia. The National Association of Practicing Psychiatrists is among groups urging an investigation into the use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in children. One man who's been campaigning for this review is Libertarian MP David Limbrick, and he joins me now. David, tell me about the significance of the Cass report.
It really is a landmark report, like you said in your opening statement. Some of the things that Hilary Cass has gone through in quite a detailed manner is she said straight up that there's no good evidence that puberty blockers reduce suicidality in children. There's nothing really known about the long-term harms of these drugs. Doctors can't tell at an early age. They can't easily diagnose which children will continue being trans and which won't. And basically the whole science base that this is based on is really, really weak. And in the UK, they're stopping using this sort of medicine for children. And we're in the situation in Australia where in Victoria, we have these laws that basically enforce an affirmation-only approach, which means we couldn't go down the same path as what England's doing at the moment. And so I think, we've been calling for a review for a while. We need some sort of review in Australia similar to the Cass review.
Absolutely, and we seem to have so little transparency in this country compared to the US and the UK. The Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne is named a couple of times in this report. What do we know about what's happening at gender clinics in children's hospitals throughout the country?
Yeah, you're right. It was named in the report. I think it's named in it. They have a table which looks at clinical guidelines, and I think I'd describe it as an unflattering view of what they do. We know that there's been an explosion in the number of children that have been referred to these clinics in Australia, in particular in Melbourne. But as the Cass review stated, we've got a similar situation here. We don't really have a good understanding of the reasons why they've been referred. And similarly to the UK, a very large proportion of these are girls.
And you've got that issue of social contagion with girls and so many other mental health issues. And again, there seems to be just revelations in recent months about the connectedness there, the fact that so many of these girls have pre-existing issues, and this is almost a result of that. Or for many of them, if they're left alone, the issues resolve themselves if you don't set them down the path of gender-affirming care.
Yeah, I mean, many of these children that were examined in the Cass review, they had other underlying conditions such as autism spectrum disorder or a history of trauma.
Yep.
And so there's many interconnected issues here. And, just sending them down this medicalised path of giving them cross-sex hormones and things like this seems really irresponsible, especially after what's happened with the Cass review.
That's it. And there has been research on that the kids who are gender confused, if you just leave them alone, let them be, a lot of that gender confusion sorts itself out as they grow up. Now, the Giggle versus Tickle federal court case continues as Giggle for Girls app founder Sal Grover fights a discrimination case brought against her by a transgender activist who was barred from her app on the grounds of being of the wrong sex. Outside the federal court this week, there have been protests from the trans lobby, and I like this comment from MP John Ruddick, who asked, as you look at this footage, how can such a tiny fringe group be so politically empowered? And they really do exercise disproportionate power and influence, not just politically, but in the media, in the corporate world. How did we get here, David?
I think the Cass review actually outlined some of these things. The fact that so many of these doctors were scared to talk about things indicates that there's a really serious political influence. And, at these protests, when women want to go and speak, the objective of counter-protesters and these activists is to silence people. They want to shut them up. And when you've got a situation where people can't have open discussions about things, then you've really got a situation where ideology has taken hold, and we're not talking about medicine or rationality anymore. Yeah. We're talking about ideology.
Well, this is the problem here, because this is the field of medicine, but so much of what has happened is not based on science or research. It's based on ideology and activism and junk data. And here we are. You've tried to get a review happening in Victoria. What's the status of that? With this Cass report, is there a chance that it's going to be something that the Labor government will consider?
I think eventually they'll have no choice. They'll have to do something. We can't just continue on in the dark in Victoria and look at the rest of the world as if it's not happening, like as if what's happening in the UK is irrelevant to us. There's already activists coming out and attacking the Cass review's integrity, which I think is a bit much, because it's probably one of the most detailed reviews that we've ever seen in this space, and it's damning.
Absolutely damning. David Limbrick, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.